So Bob emails, what do you say?
Yes.
This first email from anonymous patron, she says, when in session with a client, is it a vulnerable experience for you too? I recently had a session with my therapist where we discussed my discomfort for feeling real reciprocal care for my therapist, considering I don't really know my therapist. So I think what she's saying here is that she discussed discomfort. She feels uncomfortable that she cares about her client, even though she doesn't really know her client. When you hear that, what do you think might be going on with the client?
I think they're nervous. They're worried about rejection, and that they might appear foolish to the therapist, and the therapist might reject them, and or look at them funny or whatever. Right. That's what I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a common transference or concern.
Yeah.
That as a client, you're disclosing a lot.
Yep.
And you enjoy that, but then you're like, but you never, the client is thinking, therapist, you never talk about yourself. And that's usually an indication that you really care about me because we both are sharing, and you never talk about yourself at all. And I know that that's the way it's supposed to be, but that doesn't feel great to me. It feels uncomfortable. I think another possibility is that she could have been parentified and feels the need to please and take care of other people. And if they don't give the opportunity to be taken care of, it can be uncomfortable. Hard to know.
Yeah.
Going on. I also discussed how I realized it sometimes made me a bit resentful that I always had to come in and do the hard work of being vulnerable, and she didn't. She quickly mentioned that she can also feel vulnerable during therapy, but we didn't go further into it, and we moved back into focusing on me and my feelings. But it did make me very curious. What might make a therapist feel vulnerable when working with a client? And what is that vulnerability like for you as a therapist? Thanks for all your great podcast episodes. I especially appreciate Bob sharing his own vulnerability. So what might make a therapist feel vulnerable when in session?
Well, if a client happens to be talking about an area where a therapist has a raw spot, that can make a therapist feel vulnerable.
And what's that like? That's what she's asking. What is it like for you as a therapist to have that touched on?
I get nervous and my heart rate goes up because I fear that I might fall out of balance, or I might do the wrong thing, or I might make a client feel uncomfortable. I get teary quite a bit with clients. I suppose some people would call that vulnerable. I just think it's being genuine. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if those two words might get sort of braided together.
Right. That's my first question is we have to define vulnerability. There's a lot of usages of that term. Are we talking about what you're talking about where you just feel emotion, some raw sadness or something? Or are we talking about fragility? Are we talking about disclosing of your personal information? Are we talking about being traumatized as a therapist, dysregulated as a therapist? What exactly we're talking about. But I think what anonymous patron is actually getting at is she has what we call a vulnerability hangover. And it's a vulnerability to share and to be vulnerable with someone is exposing. Yeah. And we desire that. And we, in therapy, hopefully have a therapist that can hold that.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily, given our internalizations and our traumas, afterwards or during, we can feel overexposed. And we can have some anger about that or some discomfort and some desire to balance the scales. And one of the things as a client you might want to do to balance the scales is, well, now you have to share because I'm being vulnerable here, and you have to reciprocate by putting yourself out there. And yeah, it's a viable request. And as a therapist, depending on the style, they might actually do that for you. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be the therapist taking over the session, and that could have been what your therapist was trying to do by saying that she can also feel vulnerable during therapy. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the vibe was when she was describing that, but it's possible. So yeah, I would just focus on your discomfort. It's normal to feel uncomfortable, talk about it and process it and ask for that to be held as well. The goal is that you can be vulnerable with your therapist and other people that you can trust and not second guess it based on previous traumas, that kind of thing. So couple things I want to talk about briefly is, Bob, are you on Cameo now? Because I've been trying to set you up on Cameo.
Yeah, last week.
So you have a Cameo page.
I do.
If people don't know what Cameo is, it's where you can get H-level celebrities to say happy birthday to your friend or happy anniversary or something. And so I want to advertise that.
Thanks.
So you can go, is it Bob Gettle?
Yes.
It's Goettle.
That's right.
Bob Gettle. And how much are you charging on Cameo?
60.
Okay.
You told me to charge 60.
Okay.
I do what I'm told.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing there are some of you that might want a Cameo from Bob. I'd be really curious as to how he'll make the Cameo, because when I first started making Cameos, it was a real mind screw, because to have to just talk into your phone for a minute or two and make it coherent and I guess interesting and worth the expense. I don't know. It's a thing. And the first, 50 Cameos I did, I probably spent a half an hour on each one, even though Cameos are only supposed to be like a minute or so. And the video eventually that I would send would only be a couple minutes. But now I have I have practice and so, sometimes I spend a fair amount of time thinking about what I might say. And sometimes I'll sing a song and I'll rehearse the song because, sometimes I try to find a song that matches the person's name, and I've never heard the song before, so I have to learn it and da-da-da. Anyway.
I can only imagine singing Happy Birthday like Marilyn Monroe. That'd be the only singing I do.
Ew, gross. So for anyone out there that want that or anything else from Bob on Cameo, you can even just have Cameos where you just want a little pep talk or a little personal message to yourself. People will do that. They'll be like, hey, I just need a little pep talk. I'm procrastinating. Of course, we can't provide therapy over Cameo,
right,
but we can speak generally to certain topics. So go ahead and hit up Bob on Cameo. Also, I want to remind everyone that on the Patreon community page, so on Patreon, there's different tabs, right? You have the main feed on our Patreon page that has all our episodes and posts and everything. But if you click on the community tab, it's where any patron can post there. And I want that place to be a place where people can have conversations about things, patrons. And so I always look at the community page every day and will participate in conversations, but I feel like other people don't necessarily know that that's there, and they don't necessarily respond to other people's, because sometimes people ask questions of the community, and I get the feeling that not a lot of people check that page is my thing. Anyway, so just a reminder there. So another thing I wanted to talk about, Bob, was or was it just last week, we almost got in a bar fight.
Oh, that sucked. That was last week, yeah. That was ridiculous.
So chime in with any details that you remember. So Bob and I, just the two of us, we went to a local dive bar near where we live. And I'd been here before the pandemic and liked it. And Stacy didn't like this place and didn't want to go back. So when Bob was like, hey, let's go out to dinner, I was like, oh, let's go to this dive bar. And they have burgers and tater tots and beer and stuff and darts and video games and pool and stuff. And so we were hanging out, playing cards and having a good time. And then we were leaving, and I think you went to the bathroom, I think.
I was paying the tab.
Oh, you're paying the tab. Okay. Yeah. And I was by the front door, and I was watching these three fellas play this golf game. If you're familiar, people out there, there's a game that you can play. It's golf, but it has a big rolly ball that you spin to hit the ball. And I'm guessing this game came out probably 20 years ago or something. And these three guys are playing multiplayer golf game. And I'm just kind of passively watching because I'm waiting for Bob to pay the tab. I think it took you a while to pay the tab.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there, just watching casually. And then the three guys finish their game and they walk away from the video game, and they walk past me, and I think they're going to play pool or darts because there's a lot of pool tables behind us. And so again, I'm just kind of sitting there waiting, and then finally Bob comes to me, and I thought, well, let's maybe play this video game because kind of look fun. Let's just play. In my head, I'm like, we'll put in $1 or however much it costs, $1,
Right.
and we'll play one hole and we'll suck at the game, but it'll be fun. It'll just be a little thing. Because, we'd played darts for a while. We'd played cards for a while.
Right.
So it's like, let's play this stupid golf game. And Bob and I used to golf a lot, so it was kind of reminiscent of that.
That's true.
And so I start to put money in, and it turns out there's already credits in the game. Or there was already a game in progress or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh. And mind you, the 3 guys who were playing the game as I was watching had been, had vacated the area. I'm going to take a guess and say 15 minutes ago. It was a while.
It was. It took a long time to pay the tab.
Yeah, these 3 guys were not at the video game.
Right.
All 3 of them for a while. You might know where this is going, dear listener. So the 2 of us, you and I, start playing, and you and I played, I'm going to guess, 5 holes of this game. And it turns out that as we're playing, I'm like, oh, I think they just left the video game because there's 3 golfers on this game, and there were 3 guys that walked away. And I guess I could have at that point put 2 and 2 together and said, are they still playing this game? But I don't even think I would have done that because they just walked away.
Yeah.
And I was standing right there, and they did nothing to indicate that they were coming back. Anyway,
Right.
So you and I play for a while, and I'm thinking, man, this game never ends.
Right. I kept thinking that too.
Because usually when you play a game that you don't know how to play, within, like with pinball, I'm done within 15 seconds.
Right.
There's only a few games that I can play for a while, like Galaga or Miss Pac-Man.
Yeah.
But other games, I die so fast. So I'm like, how are we playing this? I don't know. I don't know if they put a lot of money in, or the game is just really cheap to play, or I don't know. So you and I were playing, I'm going to take a guess and say we were playing for 15 minutes, maybe longer. So by now, I'm going to take a guess and say that we're 30 to 45 minutes out. I don't know. What do you think, how much time do you think we were playing the video game when you came back to me?
It was less than that. It was about 10 minutes.
Okay. So let's say
you were the red guy and the blue guy with the yellow pants, and I was the yellow guy with the blue pants, but I couldn't keep them straight.
Yeah. So conservatively,
and just like when we played golf when I was young, I hid into the woods a lot.
So conservatively, let's say that it was 20 minutes from the time that the guys had left.
Yeah, that's about right.
And you were gone for about 10.
Yep.
Then we play for about 10.
Yeah, that's right.
Then all of a sudden, the 3 guys are just on us.
Yep.
And they're like, hey, what are you doing playing our game? And I instantly start to apologize because I'm like, oh my God, this was your game? I had no idea. It didn't even cross my mind, but I started to apologize. Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that I played your game. I didn't know. And I didn't blame them. I didn't say like, what are you doing walking away from? I just was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Because I'm like, it's just a stupid video game. I can't imagine that. It'd be the same as if someone got up to go to the bathroom, like a whole table, and then I sat down at their table thinking that they were gone. They come back and they're like, we were sitting there. And I'd be like, oh, sorry, I didn't know. I wouldn't, it just doesn't matter. It does not matter. So I'm apologizing up and down. I
had to buy them around.
You did.
Yeah.
And so, so both of us are just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And at least one of the guys, he kept saying what phrase?
Common courtesy. That was the thing.
Common sense.
Common sense. That's right. Just have some common sense. Just have some fucking common sense, I think was how he put it at the end.
Yeah. He kept saying common sense.
Yeah.
So again, both of us are apologizing because what's the big deal?
Yeah.
And also we didn't know.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll fall on our sword and say that it was our fault. Okay.
Sure. Why not?
Big deal.
And you offered them money.
Well, so this is escalating. So the guy, he's like, it's just common sense, man. And I double down on my apology, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I guess I should have thought that you guys were coming back. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm smiling.
Actually, what you thought was that they went to play pool because there was a group of guys who were playing pool. What they did is they went outside to smoke, and then they came back, and you thought they just vacated the game to go shoot some pool.
Yeah.
Why not?
I didn't even know there was a back door.
Right.
That you
Yeah,
could,
right.
Because they were right next to the front door.
Yeah.
And why would, anyway, but even if they went outside the front door, I would have thought, even if I did see them go out the back door, I would have thought, well, definitely they've left the building.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Anyway, so he's like, we just went out to smoke and we were only gone for a little bit. And I'm like, well, you're gone for a while. But yeah, my bad. I'm sorry. I didn't know. And the guy's like, it's just fucking common sense. And he's getting more angry.
Yeah.
As you and I are apologizing. Like wholeheartedly about a fucking video game.
Yeah, the really important stuff. Unbelievable.
And but it hasn't really hit me the absurdity to this situation. These three grown men.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess they're in their 30s or something.
That seems about right.
By now, we're kind of standing toe to toe.
Yeah. He sort of steps up.
Yeah, and I'm like, my goodness, he's common sense, and I just think I could argue with this guy, but we're leaving because that's what our whole we were on the way out, I'm just like, and so I reached into my wallet and I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm sorry, and I just start pulling out bills, and I think I pulled out like 40 or 60 bucks. 40 bucks, okay, and I'm like, here you go, man. I'm sorry. I hope this makes up for it, and. He takes the money.
No, he didn't take the money.
He grabbed onto it, but then he says, I don't want your fucking money. Oh. And he tried to give it back to me. And I was just like,
oh, that's right.
Consider this,
I don't want your money. Just have some fucking common sense.
Yeah. So then we just walked out and I think he threw the money on the floor.
You said, you're getting upset. And he's like, I'm not getting upset. And I said, my last comment was, I think you're getting upset.
I forgot about that.
And you threw your money on the table and you walked out without another word.
Oh, I took the money and put it on the table?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I believe that's what you did.
Oh, no, I think I gave it, I don't know, who knows, but I thought I gave it to him. He grabbed it like reflexively.
Yeah.
Then was like, I don't want your fucking money. And I wouldn't take it back. And then he threw it on the table.
Oh, that's right.
Because I was just like,
that's right. And then
I'm not taking it back.
Yeah.
You clearly, in my head, I'm like, you clearly feel disgruntled and harmed. And so this is an apt and just reciprocation for my transgression. Play the next 50 games on me.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
My thought was maybe they had a tournament going and they were playing for big stakes or something, or who knows what, but...
Then why the fuck would you walk away?
Why would you walk away from a video game?
While I'm standing right there.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I didn't really want to play the game while they were playing, but looking back, I would look like someone who was waiting for them to finish playing so I could play.
And if you wanted to keep the game, maybe common sense would dictate that you'd say to the guy, hey, we still got this game going. We're just going to smoke.
Yeah. Or sometimes if you leave a beer nearby or a coat.
Yeah.
Something
that indicates that you will be back.
Yeah.
They left nothing.
Other than just you're playing a video game and you just walk off. And the only commonsensical clue was that there were still credits in the game. You know what I mean? There was still, like, I didn't have to put any money in order to play it. That's the only commonsensical notion. Even though they were literally not even in the building. No, they were gone.
They were gone.
They weren't on the premises.
No.
I'm supposed to have common sense that Occam's razor is that they were still playing the game and they were still on the premises, just outside, because the other thing is people don't smoke in Seattle much. So that's not an assumption either. But even if they were outside smoking, I would still assume that they were done playing the game. Anyway, it just boggles me that one, you'd get upset, and two, that upon you and I apologizing in a
sincere,
we didn't have to apologize, but we were apologizing because it's like, oh yeah, sorry, that people just double down.
It's weird. They double down on kindness or decency or whatever.
Yeah. You alerted me to a transgression. I'm apologizing. I'm offering to rectify the situation, and you're still pissed off. Yeah. Like, so why even bring up the fact that I committed a transgression? If you're not looking for justice, if you're not looking for, what did you want me to do? Yeah. Like, get on my knees and kiss your feet? Like, what are you hoping to happen here?
That probably wouldn't do it. He kept saying common sense. Like, I wondered what his angle was. What the hell did he want? He didn't seem to want anything we were offering, but I can't imagine what he did want.
I mean, looking back, I think he was literally looking for a fight.
It looked like that. He's spoiling, yeah.
Or he's just a miserable human being. I feel like the other two guys weren't really participating as
They
much.
weren't. One guy sat down on the left, and the other guy was standing back. It was just the one fella.
Just that one guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought, am I going to get in a fight over this?
I thought we might too.
And I'm thinking, Bob and I are older, but we're not small men.
No.
We could probably take this guy or at least put up a good fight. And I just thought, well, I guess that's how this evening ends. So that's what, here's some money.
Yeah.
And I'm leaving now.
Yep.
And so anyway.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah, it was a fun night.
Way too many tater tots.
You can never have too many. They were crispy.
They were crispy.
All right, let's take a break. Get back. More emails. All right, we're back from the break. Let's do an OPP, Bob.
Oh.
Do an OPP, Bobby G. And we have Kyla from Novato, California. We got Carolyn from Ottawa. We have Gil from Ontario as well. We have Savannah from Portland, Oregon.
Right on.
The other Seattle. We have Gwen from Richmond, British Columbia. Beautiful Richmond. They have great Chinese food there.
Richmond.
In Richmond, yes.
Is that near Vancouver?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just before Vancouver on the way up there. Ilza from Latvia. Christine from Shakopee, Minnesota. Shauna from Wisconsin, Courtney from Virginia, Arlene from Illinois, Chris from Vallejo, California, Sabrina from Visalia, California, Alyssa from Vista, California.
Whoa, the V's.
Nicholas from Ontario. Well, we got 3 Ontarios.
Wow.
We got Melody from Iowa. We have Xavier from God Knows Where, Sophie, and Peter from God Knows Where. Thank you for being a patron and staying a patron through thick and thin. Next email, Bob. We have anonymous annual upper-tier patron says, Dear Dr. Kirk and Bob, I was hoping you would be able to offer some possible explanations or theories as to why someone would intentionally trigger themselves. I've done this a few times to myself, and it never ends well for me. I don't understand why I would do this to myself, and I get so overwhelmed and then incredibly angry and frustrated with myself. I've been off kilter for days now, and I can't stand these feelings. For example, I was sexually assaulted as a child a few times by an older kid in my neighborhood, and then recently sexually assaulted by someone close to me a couple years ago. I've been getting triggered lately, unintentionally, by sexually explicit content in TV shows and social media, and I had become really dysregulated to the point of screaming and smashing plates on the floor. I was able to calm back down eventually, but then the next day I came across content on a porn website that was the exact sexual act in which I was assaulted a couple years back, except the sexual act in the porn video was consensual. Right. And at first I scrolled past it, but something within me made me go back to it and watch it. I immediately became overwhelmed and upset, and I think I even somewhat re-traumatized myself. I keep having the image as an intrusive thought, and I am so mad at myself for watching it, I could cry. Why would someone do this to themselves? Have you heard of this before? I feel like a freak and an idiot for doing stupid things I know cause me such pain. What's wrong with me? P.S. Thank you for all you do. I love the podcast with you and Bob. And sometimes I re-listen to past episodes several times just because your voices are so soothing and you speak with such compassion, unless we're talking about some jerk faces playing a golf game. You're both helping so many people out here in the world. So, Bob, why would someone re-traumatize themselves in this way?
Well, the first thing I want to say is thank you for thanks. I don't think that the goal is to re-traumatize. I think they're trying to work something out, and they're sort of drawn to the thing. And maybe a way to think about it, it's not probably the best way to think about it, is sometimes people have dreams about, a traumatic event. I think it's the body's process of like digesting trauma. So my guess is that's probably what your body is doing. It's the problem with it, if you could say, is that the exposure to it is not systemic enough or concentrated in properly so that you actually can habituate to the thing. But my guess is once you do habituate to it, you won't find yourself drawn to that. You might still have a vulnerable spot. So when you come across stuff like that, like if you see another, porn thing or whatever, you might find that it's somewhat activating. But proper exposure therapy, which is going to be, pretty mindful and thought out and planned, will probably take care of it for you.
Yeah, this is a very common thing. There's nothing unusual about you. It's actually a very common thing. It's near universal what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
When we go through trauma, we re-experience it. There's a lot of different ways in which we re-experience it, and there's also a lot of different conceptualizations of it. But piggyback back on what Bob is saying is that, it's one way of looking at it is that your body is ready to process it. Yeah. And without a specialist working with you, you can actually traumatize yourself even more. This is a really common thing. Someone will go through a trauma, which is awful, and then the reoccurrence, the intrusiveness, and then the re-triggering can exacerbate or cause even more trauma. I can see someone 30 years after a trauma, and 90% of their symptoms are due to the re-traumatization afterwards. So it's really important that you get the treatment from a specialist, because if you have guided exposure, then you can actually recover. But if you don't have guided exposure, it can just get worse and worse and worse. And this is how PTSD develops. This is, what you're experiencing right now is not only the worry of being re-traumatized, which can compound and eventually lead to you not even wanting to be on the internet, or not wanting to leave the house, or not wanting to interact with anyone. So not only is it potentially causing more anxiety and more trauma, but it's also seemingly causing you to beat yourself up psychologically, which can lead to the other aspects of PTSD, which is the feeling of being disconnected, the demoralization, the depression around like, why even try, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, you want to get specialized treatment. The other possibility is that the trauma taught you that you don't matter and you don't deserve to be safe, and that you do deserve to be harmed. When we are harmed, victimized by other people, we believe about ourselves the way that other people treat us.
Yeah.
And so if people treat us well, then we think we're good. And if people treat us like shit, then we think we're a piece of shit. So this is what Freud called masochism, that when we have that internalized, we all have a bit of it, but when you have a lot of that happening to you, then one of the ways of coping with it is to believe that we deserve to be harmed. It's just like, well, I might as well just give in to this thing and stop fighting it and just say, okay, fine. It's sort of like if you were a nerd and you have a nerd friend on the playground, and the bullies come up and start to bully you and your friend because you're both nerds, then one of the coping styles is to, you as the nerd, you start to bully your nerd friend, and now the bullies might take it easy on you or be a little bit nicer to you, not entirely. It's essentially that. It's like, okay, if I can't beat him, join him, I will beat up on myself, and I get some power from that, and it just feels like that's the right thing to do. And so when you're re-traumatizing yourself as a way to, and then afterwards beating yourself up. So you're doing it both ways. You're masochistically exposing yourself and then masochistically beating yourself about exposing yourself. Essentially what's happening is there's an internalization. So I don't know, it's hard to know exactly what conceptualization. There are others, but again, I would explore that with a therapist.
Highly treatable. So I hope you do seek some help. There's every reason to be hopeful that can settle.
Yeah. Might take a while to find the right clinician, right. But they're out there.
Yeah.
Anonymous annual tier patron says, "Hi, Dr. Kirk and Bob. I think I'm going to fire my therapist after seeing him for 4 years. Just a few days ago, I couldn't even imagine him retiring one day because I was so attached to him, and it caused too much hurt and sorrow to think about our relationship ending one day. Now, after our last session, I feel so enraged with him, and I don't think our relationship can be repaired. For the first time in 4 years, I abruptly left our session 15 minutes early and stormed off, so upset. It was like the virtual equivalent of storming out of his office and slamming the door." So I'm guessing this must have been an online session or something.
Oh, yeah, right.
"I'm so incredibly hurt and angry with him and feel like I truly lost all trust in him. This is causing me such distress and pain, and I don't know how to cope. It's all It's also hard because this kind of grief isn't really understood by people who don't have experience in therapy. So my friends and family probably won't understand how impacted I am by this loss.
Oh,
Just chiming in here. Yeah, totally.
Right.
I think most people would be like, well, just find another therapist.
Right.
He was my first and only therapist. I feel like he shattered my heart, and I'm so hurt. I just want to scream at him. I have my next appointment this week, but I don't plan on going. I don't think there's anything he could say to me for me to trust him again. I feel devastated by this loss, and I don't know how to deal with it. What do you think, Bob?
Well, we don't know what happened, so it'd be hard to make comment about what the person should do. If there was some kind of, violation, then yeah, I'd say don't go back. But if there's always also the possibility that something is being enacted in therapy that's worth going back for, but it's impossible for me to give you any guidance because I don't know what happened that led you to leave the session precipitously.
I would suspect that it is repairable, annual up to your patron, but I don't know. Yeah, there's no detail here. My dog is barking. But from the way it sounds, if things were going fantastically for 4 years and then something happened in one session, I mean, unless he just revealed himself as this horrible human being, I'm guessing that he might have made a mistake.
Yeah.
Something might have been touched. He might have misunderstood. Unless it's an egregious, like he tried to kill you or have sex with you in the middle of a session, then I'm guessing that it's worth exploring to see if a repair can happen. If not, then then you're done. And certainly it's your choice. You don't have to try to repair it. You can certainly not. But lots at stake. I would imagine.
Yeah.
Not only this relationship, it's hard to find a good therapist who you connect with, and two, if it's possible to repair and you don't try, then you could walk away from this as yet another reason to never try to open up to anyone ever again.
I agree. So I was thinking about that title story from Love's Executioner where the person shows up for therapy with Irv and she's upset, not because she and her therapist had a sexual relationship, but because the therapist ended it. And Irv is horrified by that and can't see why how there'd be there's no justification for that, which I happen to agree, and meets the guy. And it turns out he's psychotic. He had been doing a silent retreat for weeks. And when he came back to real life, he was having a psychotic episode from, I think from like when you're isolated. Yeah, or something.
Right, yeah.
So he felt horrible about what happened and he was very apologetic. And it came from, this out of touch with reality. So the reason it came to mind, I mean, it's a very dramatic thing to think about. I hope that didn't happen to the person that wrote in, is therapists might have had an off day. And that's a sort of a glib way to put it. They might have, something might have been up for them and they were, might be worth learning about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't normally think about that, right? That a therapist could have an off day.
Yeah.
And that there would be a legitimate reason for that.
Right.
The fantasy is that they just sit in their office waiting for us to show up all week. And then when we walk in, they turn on and they don't have a life outside. They don't have their own issues. They don't have their ups and downs. But of course, they absolutely will. All right. This next email, up to your patron, Laura from Munich. She says, "Hi, Dr. Kirk and Bob. Do you believe that you can have disorganized attachment without suffering immense trauma and abuse in childhood? I really resonate with Bob's description of disorganized attachment, and I have this thing where I have an extreme fear of people seeing me for myself and hating me for it." Does that sound like what you talk about?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Like I have this shameful, disgusting side to myself that I have to hide. On one hand, I am desperately craving attention and love, but on the other hand, I do everything to keep people at arm's length. I am really people-pleasing. I can never say no. I'm always smiling and presenting this image to other people. I listen to everyone's problems and do everything to make them happy, but if I say something even vaguely to their disliking, I cry myself to sleep for the next few weeks. If I even slightly perceive rejection regarding my person, I get this sinking feeling in my stomach. I get hot and cold, and my heart is racing, and I feel like my skin is trying to suffocate me. Do you experience that?
No.
Sounds like a shame feeling.
Yeah, it does. It does. I have something like that sometimes. Yes.
Yeah. I am paralyzed with fear and stuck until they release me by saying something nice to me and not acting differently towards me, and thereby giving me some temporary relief. But my childhood was nice and normal. There was a little bullying because I was a strange, introverted kid and overly emotional, and my parents weren't really attuned to my feelings since they are quite immature about their own feelings. But overall, I never doubted their love, just their capacity to help me with anything. I have tried a few different therapists, but so far, nobody has been able to help me. So what do you think? So she's asking,
Yeah.
Can you have disorganized attachment without experiencing abuse during childhood?
I don't know the answer to that question, but what I would guess is there's lots of roads to Rome. So why not? The proof's in the pudding, as they say. Well, that's not what they say. They say the proof in the pudding is in the eating. What you experience is a better marker of whether or not you have a particular attachment style than what you went through. So I just pay attention to what you're experiencing.
Yeah. And it's, I think, kind of normal for people to want some answers, I suppose.
Yeah, right.
And what I'll say is that it's possible. I mean, you're definitely describing what Bob will talk about in terms of defectiveness schema, which isn't necessarily disorganized attachment, meaning that you and Bob have a schema that assumes 100% that there's something shameful and rejectable about you, and so you have to always be acting like something else, or you have to be people-pleasing or something. That's not necessarily disorganized attachment. It can, there's some overlap there, but it's not the same thing. Disorganized attachment is when you get closer to someone, you feel terror, you feel actual fight or flight reactions. And I don't necessarily hear that in your description. So easy to understand how that would be related to being abused by your caretaker when you're young, one of your parents, because you feel compelled, evolutionary-wise, to run to your parent, and yet your parent is the monster. Your parent is both the safe haven and the monster at the same time, and so you are disorganized as a child because you don't know how to cope with closeness or danger. Yeah. And it gets generalized to other contexts. You could be 7 years old and be afraid, and you won't run to the teacher because you equate teacher possibly with danger. Yeah. So, and you might equate danger with safe haven. So as a 10-year-old, you might have a bully who's treating you, who's terrorizing you, and you might actually feel like the bully is the safe haven because that's the thing you learned when you were young. Right. So as a human being, we are very oriented away from terror, away from threat and danger, and towards safety. And if you have no organization to your style or to your coping or to your behavior on how to move towards safety and away from danger, then you're disorganized. You're in a constant state of fear. You are not allowed to actually ever feel safe. You don't get a chance to connect or feel safe when you're connecting. It's like you feel connected kind of, but it's sort of like having sex. In order to have enjoyable sex, you have to feel safe. You have to feel like you're in a good space. And yet you crave sex in all likelihood. So you want to move towards a sexual encounter or your person that you have sex with. But if the more sexual vibes in the air are equated with danger, then it's hard to become turned on. It's hard to get into the groove. And so it's just better to avoid the whole thing. But you can't because you need it. So it's the same with closeness and attachment. So I'm not hearing that in your description. What I'm hearing is a defectiveness schema. Now, it's possible that you just didn't include that, but that's one thing. The other thing is that you mentioned that you weren't abused growing up, so why would you have even a defectiveness schema? Well, you say that your parents weren't really attuned to your feelings since they were quite immature about their own feelings. Now, you also say, I never doubted their love, but their capacity to help you, just their capacity to help you with anything. So there's a lot of schemas, there's a lot of beliefs that will emerge from that lack of attunement. The child will be pushed in different directions based on their own personality or the circumstance of their lack of attunement. But one of them is the reason why I'm not being attuned to is because there's something deeply flawed with me. Even though I'm not being treated poorly, I'm not being abused, I'm not being terrorized or hit or yelled at, but there's a lot of needs that children have. And also, you only remember probably what it was like when you were 5 years old, 4 years old at the youngest maybe, or 3. But there's a lot of attunement that is needed when you're 0 to 1 that you won't remember what that quality was like. So there's a lot of things that could have happened there. A lack of attunement could have been similar or more profound or something that can cause a child to run up against this conundrum. Why, when I signal that I have a need, when I signal that I need my parents to pay attention to me, when I signal that I have joy, when I signal that I have pain or discomfort or anger, and I'm not having the attunement, they don't notice me, or they don't understand how to treat my emotions, they distance themselves or something. What's wrong with this situation? What's going on here? And there's a lot of different solutions that young children will develop. Sometimes it's narcissism, sometimes it's preoccupation, sometimes it's avoidance, and sometimes it's there's something deeply wrong with me. That's why this is happening. It must be there's something wrong with me. I agree. There is something wrong with me. There is something deeply wrong with me. That's the only way that it would explain this, because I'm signaling the way everyone else is signaling, and but yet I'm being treated differently. So that's just one thing to explore with your therapist. Any thoughts on that?
Really well put.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, particularly how you frame sex.
How so?
That in order to enjoy sex, you have to feel safe. And if the closer you get to somebody, the less safe you feel, then the less you're going to enjoy sex. So you're still going to be pushed towards it and pulled away from it all at once. This is a nice way to think about disorganization.
Yeah, and you could also just have that experience with sex because of sex and not disorganization.
Right.
But yeah, if you're disorganized, there's a greater likelihood that you'll also have that around sex. Yeah, because it's vulnerable, and you are expected typically sexually to both at the same time express yourself and care for the other person. It's a non-verbal, usually physical dance between two or more people where you are both expressing your animalistic needs from inside of you that are deep and powerful, and at the same time paying attention to your partner or partners and also attending to them. And sometimes it's like a 70-30 sort of a thing, but it vacillates back and forth. In order for people to feel vulnerable and in order to go there, not only just behaviorally, but also emotionally, it's sort of like you grab, this is a non-sexual situation, you grab like a shy 7-year-old and you throw them on stage and you say, okay, give a half hour speech on Legos. The 7-year-old is just going to clam up. It's a terrifying situation. You can't expect that child to do that. Now, if you just walk up to the 7-year-old after dinner and say, tell me about your Legos, they might ramble for half an hour about Legos. So it's within them to talk about Legos, but they need to be they need to feel comfortable. And with sexuality and with attachment, unless you are not anxious, then it's going to be hard to, one, even just get into your power, your sexual power, but also to attend to the other person. And of course, if both people are traumatized, then there's several wrenches in all the gears. So it's worthy of working on, of course. And instead of shaming oneself and saying there's something wrong with me or us, or there's something wrong with me because my partner isn't showing attraction to me, that kind of thing. Anyway. Let's take a break. When we get back, more emails. What do you say?
Yes.
All right. Next email. Big Fan Morgan, upper tier patron. She says, that's what she called herself, Big Fan Morgan.
Right on.
I've been thinking lately about what attachment type I fit. I think I used to be more preoccupied, but I feel that I find that I feel disorganized most of the time. I am a clinician and am constantly digging into my tendencies and self-awareness, and I find my attachment style hard to pin down. But here's what I've come up with. Love to me is like a vast body of water. I want to swim, so love to me is like a vast body of water. I want to swim in the love water, but I'm in a giant floating hamster wheel. I work hard to poke holes to submerge myself, but when I do, I panic because it feels like I might drown. I work hard to poke holes to maybe get traction, submerge yourself in the water. So it's like a barrier, I guess, there.
Right.
But there's a worry of, so there's a barrier and a worry of drowning if you go too far into it. So I patch it up at the hamster wheel and sit on the surface, staring downwards, preoccupied with the idea of floating, paralyzed with the fear of sinking. What do you think? Does this sound like disorganized attachment to you?
Oh, I'm terrible at this sort of thing. It sounds more like preoccupied to me.
How so?
They're thinking a lot about connection, love. Though the metaphor, I guess I'm interested in what's the experience like if there's of attachment with your attachment figures, if it's a parent or a sib or a partner or whoever, like what actually happens when conflict hits or when desire hits. What do you find yourself actually doing? The metaphor, I think I probably don't quite get it, like how that might play out with somebody. Like what's the vast sea of love? Sounds like, well, I don't know. Is that scary, or is that like abundance, or is that hard to know what that is, and who they share that with?
Yeah, it's a metaphor, so it's
Don't
hard
get me
to
wrong.
know.
I love metaphors. It's a fantastic image. I'm just not sure I know how to interpret it.
Right. So I think I agree with Bob that it does sound like preoccupied with a worry of losing yourself. That's not necessarily disorganized. Disorganized, as we were talking about, is terror. You're not just afraid. Now, if the drowning is terrorizing you, like fear, just flat out fear, fight or flight response as you think about diving into love, then okay, maybe. But if it's fear and anxiety about losing yourself or being rejected is another possibility, then, and we get into some weird areas here because you can certainly have tremendous terror and trauma around rejection. So, there's not a hard demarcation between these designations either. But yeah, it's hard to know based on your metaphor. This next email, an honest patron, she says, and by the way, trigger warning, this has to do with self-harm, so skip ahead, I guess, if that triggers you. Have you ever had a client who harmed themselves during a session? I have a mostly unconscious habit of skin pinching and nail digging when I'm anxious or distressed in a conversation. One time, I drew blood from clenching my nails into my palms during a session with a past therapist. I didn't realize I had done it until she turned away from me to schedule the next appointment, and I looked down at my hands. I showed her when she turned back around, and she was very much caught off guard. In hindsight, maybe I should have approached that differently. Just chiming in here. Any thoughts on that?
Nothing wrong with what you did, and you guys were both surprised by it. It doesn't sound like what I would call self-injury. It sounds inadvertent. There wasn't an attempt to cause harm. It's just you might have learned to manage distress by inflicting pain, or maybe your body just gets tense when you're scared or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And your therapist was taken aback for a second. That's fine. If the therapist was judgmental or freaking out, then I would say that's not great. But it's human to say, "Oh my God, you're bleeding.
Yeah.
What's happening?" Now, I don't know if it is just tenseness, because she's saying that she has emotionally unconscious habits. She says, I mean, it's not classic cutting or self-harm. Typically, these are ritualized experiences that people will engage in. But with some people, it can be this way. It can present this way, skin pinching. And as distress starts to go up, as anxiety starts to go up, then the individual will do things like this, dig their nails in or pinch themselves or pull their hair as a way of just a low grade amount of pain that they are slightly unaware of and slightly aware of. Yeah. So it's not the classic, but it is potentially under that category. Anyway, so, but have you ever known anyone who did harm themselves in session, or?
Oh yeah.
How so?
Do you want me to talk about this?
Yes.
Okay. So very first DBT skills class I was teaching when I was way young, and I was running it with another novice DBT person. We were both sort of thrown into this thing, and we had a client dissociate and cut herself in the bathroom at the clinic where we worked. And then she came into the classroom and she had the most weird stare. She was just staring right at me, and I thought she was going to hit me. Like, she looked angry, like I couldn't read her. And then somebody said she's bleeding, and I looked down, and both arms were dripping because she cut pretty severely. So we called the ambulance, and they came and got her, and we removed our students because they all watched this. It's really quite.
Was it a lot of blood?
It is a good amount. I mean, not like
Gushing, but
yeah, but not just like a scratch. No, she was dripping blood. So so what we did was we left that room, and she went to wherever they took her. I guess probably to a hospital. And
did she comply at that point? And
she didn't fight any of this. When they showed up to take her, she just walked along.
Did
with
you have
them.
a conversation with her at all?
There wasn't any talking to her in that particular moment. Though I think if I remember right, what I did is I asked all the students to leave the room, and Noelle, my co-teacher, walked her back to the bathroom and tended to her wounds while we waited for the ambulance. So the rest of the students were horrified. It's actually quite risky because that stuff can be contagious. Mm-hmm. We didn't have contagion. I'm really glad. And we also didn't kick her out. And we told her, no, you don't get to leave the group. What you get to do is tell us what you're going to do to prevent it from happening again. And she took about 4 weeks. We did not want her to take longer than that. And she returned to the group, and she apologized for what she did. And I can't remember what the plan was, that she wouldn't do it again. And then she graduated, whatever, after that year. So that's the first time. The second time.
What was the staring about?
She was completely dissociated. She was just gone. She was not aware.
Was she triggered by something that happened in class?
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't remember what it was, and if I ever knew, I don't remember now. Something happened. Yeah.
And when she apologized, how did she approach that?
Very sincerely.
Because it's not really her fault, so it's a situation that.
No, it's not. It's not like apologizing because she's bad. Not like a mea culpa like that, but like a recognition of her impact on the group. I say is more the flavor of the thing. Like, she had a really crappy impact on the thing, and
how so?
It scared the shit out of people, and for some, there may have been urge to mimic. I don't know. Nobody did, as far as I know. Mm-hmm. Though,
how did you manage that? I mean, did you have to help people deal with that after?
Yeah, we stopped class. We went to another room, and we just sort of talked about it and debriefed. And I think we had maybe 6-7 students in that class at that time, and who were there that day. And we talked about the fact that she was safe, she was going to get looked after, and how's everybody here? And that was pretty horrifying. And we'll make sure that we get the room cleaned, because, the last thing anybody needs is to go and see the stains on the carpet.
How did you feel during this whole thing?
My heart rate was up. I was really nervous.
This is the beginning of your career.
Yeah, this was in 1999.
How come all the most traumatic things happen in our early career?
Well, I had another thing happen, and along these lines is we had a student in class, and she had some strange behaviors. One of them was she would sit under the table, like she would just crawl under the table. One time in class, I don't remember if it's when she was.
Really? So all of the DBT courses take place around like a boardroom table sort of thing?
That's the way I've always done it. Yeah.
Huh. In my head, I always had you in a circle without any table.
Oh, yeah. No. Books and paper and pens and pencils and a whiteboard, and it's like a class.
Yeah. But you're sitting around one big table.
One big table. Yeah, my dining table. You know my nice dining table?
Yeah.
It opens up, and we used to cram 10 people around that thing. It was a little bit tight, but we could do it.
So you took the table to work?
That table came from work. I bought it for work.
You bought it for work,
yeah.
and then you adopted it for your home situation.
Yeah.
I see.
It's a very nice table.
It is. Yeah.
It's cool because you can open it by pulling on one end, and then both ends go out.
Like unfurl.
Unfurl. Yeah. It's really cool. Yeah, I like that table, and it's big enough. And so,
and that's not even that big of a table. So how many students would sit around that thing?
8 students, 2 leaders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's still a fair amount of people.
Yeah,
but
10.
pretty close quarters.
4 on a side and 1 on each end. Yeah, it was really close. Probably
Yeah.
a little bit too close.
Huh.
Yeah. And then we did it you ever been in my tiny office on Capitol Hill, down the hall from the one that you used to have with me?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a bit tight for 10, but
Yeah,
we could do it, but it wasn't great.
It's funny because in my head, I always imagined you doing visually what I did once many years ago when I was at an agency. I had you in that office in the same chairs, but it's a very different scenario than what was happening. I don't know why I like to visualize.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, all my clients live in my old house in West Seattle. Whenever I picture them at home, it's their living room I see.
Isn't that funny?
Isn't that weird? Yeah, it's weird. Oh, and everybody on Zoom is either 5'4" or 5'8".
I think over Zoom, people seem shorter, I guess. I don't know, or video, because when people think I'm short on YouTube. I don't know if that's true.
Really?
I've heard that a couple times where people will say something. They'll see a picture on Instagram. They'll be like, "Oh, is he tall?" And I'm like, "So you assumed I was short, you know?"
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know. I don't know what that is. Maybe because you're small, like in this little device and on a phone, and you just look small or something.
You look like you're 5'8".
Yeah. Anyway, so.
Oh, so this client under the table cut herself during our meeting. Excuse me. I think she used a paper clip, and that wasn't cool. So she and I had just a matter of fact talk about how that's really tacky. You can't do that here. And she didn't do it again. She was really, I liked her. She had some quirks and also was a very lovely, sincere human, and agreed that she wouldn't do it again and didn't do it again as far as I know. So yeah. So the answer to the question is, yeah, that's happened.
Would you approach it differently if it happened in a regular session?
Like an individual session?
Yeah.
Would I approach it differently? If somebody cut in front of me or
went to the bathroom and showed up, came back and had cut?
No, I'd probably approach it the same way, very matter-of-factly. First thing, medical. Is there anything medical needed? Second thing, what happened? What triggered it? We're going to have to learn about this.
But that's different than what you were saying with the DBT class. With the DBT class, it sounds like you were more of the approach of, I mean, you said the word tacky, so it's essentially you're giving, I think, a message of, you can't do that here.
You can't do that here.
It's against the rules. But you're not saying that in your role play just now with an individual client.
No, I wouldn't say you can't do that here, though I don't want you to do that here very much.
But you know what I mean? It's a different approach, I think.
It's because of the contagion factor.
But also because, correct me if I'm wrong, DBT is a class, and it's not therapy.
It's not therapy.
You don't consider it therapy.
No, that thing will get talked about, but in the person's individual therapy, in the group, it's just we do the skills class and we keep the class running.
Right.
That's it.
There's ground rules.
Yeah.
And need to follow them,
yeah.
and that's just how it goes.
Right.
So stop that.
Yeah.
Don't cut in class. Don't
right.
cut during class.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Get it worked out, and then you got to do repair with this group.
Yeah.
Because
talk with your therapist about it or something.
Yep.
Okay.
Whatever it takes, and yeah.
I guess the way you were describing the way you approached the two incidents,
right?
I was thinking you probably wouldn't do that in individual therapy.
No, an individual. I'd be talking, what the heck happened here? Because you don't want this, and I don't want this, and yet this happened. So we got to learn it. We got to learn it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for me, I've never had someone do that in session, but I've had a lot of sessions, and the older I get, the more fades, so God knows, but I can't recall.
Yeah.
I feel like I would have remembered something like that. Might someone have harmed themselves just before or after or during when they go to the bathroom or something? You know, I could imagine that happening.
Yeah.
I think I have vague memories of at least things being told to me that were akin to that. I don't have any current clients that are along those lines. I think if it happened to me, I might approach it a little differently than the way not entirely, but a little differently than the way you do. I think you have a point of view based on your DBT work.
Oh, for sure.
That is more on top of things, I guess. For me, given my approach to a lot of things in therapy, including this, I think I would just raise the question if they wanted to talk about it, and what do they want to do with it? I don't have skin in the game, so to speak.
Yeah.
If they wanted to do that, I can't imagine being okay with it, so to speak. But like if someone said that every session in the middle of the session, because what they do before and what they do after, I'm not going to police that, but in the middle of session, they get up and they go to the bathroom and they harm themselves somehow and they come back. And they told me about it. I'm just trying to imagine what I would do. And I think I would just say, why and what's going on? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to work on it? Was it something we talked about? What are the triggers? I might, if they don't know, I might give some psychoeducation about non-suicidal self-injury and the brain and addiction, and also tell them that I'm not going to judge them and I'm not their dad or their police officer or teacher, and I'm not afraid of it. Yeah. Because plenty of clients, I mean, when you specialize in personality disorders, you're going to get a fair amount of people who will do this sort of thing. So it wasn't foreign to me. And it never, the first thing that I would often have to do with not only the client, but their support system was calm everyone down and just say, it looks scary. And as long as I had assessed it to not be that dangerous, not as dangerous as they're perceiving it. Most people think of it as like suicidal, like they're going to die by suicide the next day or something.
Well, right. Yeah.
And it's blood and they're scary, it's just a scary image. It's a scary thing. But for you and I, this is commonplace. It's okay. It's understood. It's well researched. We've been down this road many times before. We've helped people to recover. I've had clients who never recovered. I had clients that I only saw for a short amount of time that I'm guessing continue to do it afterwards. And I didn't cry myself to sleep. But there are worse things in life that I would worry about for my clients. This is not one of them. The things I worry about with my clients are them being abused, which would happen sometimes. I would have them as a client while they're in the midst of being abused by their parents or their partner, or even at work sometimes, this kind of thing. So that scares me. That concerns me. That causes me fear and anxiety. I don't know. There are some other things. I suppose serious suicidal intention would also scare me. Yeah. Someone having non-suicidal self-injury, self-harm, cutting, just didn't faze me. I don't know why, but I think once I understood it, I'm like, oh, that's not really anything. And plus you work enough with it. So a lot of what I would have to do is just calm everyone down, just be like, hey, it's okay. We're working on it. Yeah. There's a treatment plan. Here's what we need to do. And we're going to work on it, but there's not any immediate danger as far as I can tell. Here's what you should do. Here's the crisis plan, if you see this, then we will escalate the crisis plan. But as for now, everything it's fine. Teachers, I would have to calm down a lot of times because they would really flip out. I don't know if they do anymore, but they used to.
Probably. I mean, well, at least, everybody has a learning curve, right?
Yeah. I mean, it looks scary and it's rarely talked about. So, and it's often approached in schools as a punitive thing. And a lot of people have a myth that particularly teenagers will do it because they're trying to get attention. They're just manipulative.
Oh, it's almost entirely opposite.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally I would run into some kids who would be dabbling in it as a way, quote unquote, to get attention, meaning that they're not doing it because they're suffering. They're doing it. I mean, they're suffering in a way, but the behavior doesn't last very long. It's experimental. Maybe they have a friend that does it and they feel like they want to participate or something. So occasionally that would happen, but the pattern was that it was fleeting. It was not very severe. The individual wasn't even that ashamed of it. They actually took some pride in having some solidarity with their friends or something. And so there could be that, but typically that's not, particularly for an adult. It'd be really rare for an adult to act that way. So if I had someone do that, I think I would just say, what do you want to do? Do you want to talk about it? And I'd be trying to give off the impression, which is true, that I don't judge them. I'm okay. I'm not afraid. Because I think that was a big part of it, is telling the client, and I'm sure you did this with your individual clients as well, that, in the outside world, you're going to get a lot of gasps and shock and judgment and control and freak out.
It's off-putting.
Yeah. What?
It's off-putting.
Yeah. You're not going to get it in here.
No. I might not be happy about it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be shaming somebody for
I'm not going to
it.
flip. Yeah. I'm not going to flip out.
Yeah.
I'm not going to shame you.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
I know that we're both okay.
Right.
And we'll both get through this.
Right.
And I'm here for you, and everything's fine.
Yeah.
And you can just be yourself, even if that involves cutting. You can be that person, and I will still care about you. And you could never stop cutting for the rest of your life, and I will not change my care for you. That will never change. And so be you.
Yeah.
And ask, and I will work on whatever you want to work on. If you want to try to work on it, we'll work on it. If you don't, then we won't. And I will not think a second thought about it because it's okay. So that was a big part of my thing.
Well, what I like about that is all the genuine acceptance in it.
Yeah.
It's really, people need that.
It's liberating, though, for me as a therapist, because to become someone's parent and to get all uptight about trying to control a client's behavior is a much worse place for me.
Yeah.
I'd much rather be chill and compassionate than uptight and controlling and worrying all the time.
Right.
You know, so everyone wins. All right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone. Well, wait. No. Actually.
Oh,
There's some more here
Okay.
in the email. I just sort of glanced over. We didn't get through the whole email. More recently, so this is anonymous patron. More recently, I pinched my arm through my sweater. This one I was more aware of, but also felt like I couldn't stop. I pinched and pinched and pinched, so I'm thinking this is in session. After leaving the session, I looked at the damage, and it was really bad. Severe and large raw marks that took several weeks to heal. So bruising on the arm, I think it seems like.
Yeah.
Another therapist asked me about the marks during the next session, as I also intentionally self-harm. So that's another point there.
Oh.
But he was really shocked to learn I had done that during our last conversation in session. I'm seeing another therapist now, but the appointments are virtual, and so it's much easier for me to hide these behaviors in session. I'm struggling with whether or not I should tell her when I do this kind of thing. As therapists, what would your thoughts be, and would you like to know, Bob?
I'd want to know. And I would want the person to stop during our meeting and to talk about the urge to do it. And I probably take a more active approach to it than you would. I would address it as a thing that needs to go, simply because it increases the likelihood of premature death. But it doesn't mean that the person's going to kill themselves. It just means that they're more likely, when they do non-suicidal self-injury, to die from suicide. So I would address it directly, but I never did much of this kind of work in individual therapy, and for for reasons we've already talked about, I don't work with these kind of clients anymore, and saw couples these days, anyways.
Yeah, and I get a lot of these. I read a lot of these questions on Reddit. Someone will post something like, "There's a secret that I'm keeping from my therapist. Should I tell them?" And I'm always like, yes.
Yeah.
Do you want the therapy to work? Now, you don't have to tell them everything.
Yeah, you're allowed to have privacy.
Yeah, and it depends on what you're there for, I suppose. Like, if you're there to work on smoking cessation and you have a kink that you are wanting to talk about, unless it has to do with smoking, which I'm guessing some kinks do, but if it doesn't have anything to do with what you're there for, then you don't have to. There'd be no reason. You can if you want to.
Right.
But often the questions have to do with things like this. It's like, I'm self-harming during session, and I self-harm after session and before session. Should I tell my therapist? The answer is probably yes. Now, you don't have to, and I wouldn't judge you for not.
Knows that already, though.
Right.
That's why they're writing it.
Yeah. And Bob and I will talk about this. You can raise the question without telling him. You could say, so I have a lot of things that I haven't told you because I'm worried about judgment, or I don't know. You can bring it up without saying it. But and what I want to know, I would want to know.
Yeah.
Now, would I say I'm different than Bob in this way? Would I tell you that you had to stop? No, I'd just be like, oh. Now, what I would personally do is use it as a barometer for your emotional state, because I need I need to be attuned to that.
Yeah.
So I might ask you as a client, how are you feeling? And as a part of that inquiry, I might say, are you currently subconsciously digging into your skin? Or are you pinching yourself? Not that I'm telling you to stop it, but I'm telling, it's an indication. Your body's trying to tell you something.
Oh, heck yeah.
And so we need to listen to your body
Right.
and attune to that, and maybe slow down a little bit and turn towards what you're going through. Because if you're suffering, because that's what's happening, is in all likelihood, it could be an addiction-y kind of thing as well, which happens, but it's in all likelihood that you're experiencing tremendous tension, and you're relieving it or distracting yourself by doing this. So that's a problem. If you're under that much distress, now that might be endemic, that might just be a part of the gig, but if you're just sort of rambling about work, meanwhile your body is completely freaking out, then the two of you, your therapist and you, should be turning towards that distress and like focusing on your body and maybe doing some relaxation or tending to yourself or taking a break from the topic you're talking about or something. Because that is not only fair to you, reduces your suffering, but also just teaches you to pay attention to yourself, teaches you that there are a lot of different ways in which you can relieve. You don't have to endure and white knuckle therapy, which is what it sounds like to me.
That's what it sounds like to me too. There's a possibility for agency and authority to be enacted here, that the way I've learned to deal with my distress is by pinching myself to cause pain and then, the bruising or whatever. And wouldn't it be great if I could speak, this is too much for me. Can we please go slower? This is making me want to pinch. And I don't, presumably I don't want to pinch. So can we change our tack here? Can we do something that's different? That would be a great way to attend to the distress without having to fall into the self-harm, the self-regulating self-harm.
Mm-hmm. Another aspect of this, not only the addiction side, but, maybe in that category, is that everyone that I've talked to who has non-suicidal self-injury is worried about disclosing it because they worry that I'm going to tell them they can't do it anymore because they often depend on it. So, and they could be, quote unquote, addicted to it in terms of the neurochemicals, but often people will really, they resort to these coping techniques because all else has failed. So this is their last-ditch effort. It's sort of like going after someone who smokes weed every day or drinks alcohol every night to numb out. Yeah. They get defensive about it because they subconsciously know or consciously know that if they don't have that, they have nothing and they're going to suffer. Right. So when clients have these kinds of behaviors, it's natural for them to worry about bringing it up because they're like, well, but my therapist is going to want to take this away from me. So I was always very clear that what we're going to do is we're going to have 50 other ways that work better than that, and then we'll take that away. Right. I won't take it away. You'll take it away. So this is on your terms. This is on your schedule, but I can't help you unless I know about it. I can't know the situation unless you tell me the whole thing. Now, on the flip side, could you talk about your distress? Could you disclose that you are going through a lot of tension in therapy without specifically mentioning this behavior? Yeah, you could conceivably, there's a world in which you could still get the job done without having to disclose the specifics around how you know that you're distressed and still have the distress taken care of, and the agency and the regulation and the attunement could all happen. Yeah, it's possible, but I don't see why you would do that. I don't see why you would leave that detail out.
Seems like it just augments shame.
Yeah, but I don't know. So I feel like there's different phases of therapy. Maybe you can, I can attest to this, that different therapists I have different vibes with.
Oh, for sure.
Different points in my life.
Yeah,
and there are certain closets that I don't open up.
Yeah, that's fine.
With certain therapy. Absolutely. Or certain times where I'm just, I don't really want to deal with that right now. Yeah. And then, later on I will, or with a different therapist, or I've already dealt with all that stuff. I just don't have the gumption to really get into that shit.
Right on.
So, it depends. So everyone, truly, now, take care of yourself because
you deserve it.